Thomas Maw, welcome back to the show, round two.
Hello, how are you?
Yes, delighted to have you, Tom. And so much has changed since we recorded back in January 2021. Some huge lifestyle changes that you've spoken really openly about across all your different platforms. What are the headlines that you'd want to share?
The biggest is probably my hairline is receded even more now. But yeah, so it was 2021 January, was it?
Yeah, that's right, January 21.
So that'd have been just going into my last prep, I think, for the FitX show.
Yeah,
So,
you were 110 kilos or something like that for the first time, holding that weight, looking huge, obviously using like some significant compounds to achieve that, but you were in such a good place with your training as well.
Yeah, we got into, I think it was about 112, 113 was the max that we pushed. And that was just in and out of lockdown, keeping the head in the game for as long as possible during that off season, and taking a full off season, which we needed. And it did us well. Ended up winning the FitX show and placing third, I think, at the PCA. So yeah, it was very much worth the process.
Yeah, it was great to see that kind of accumulation of all the efforts and all the things that you shared, to see you take that title and give you a little bit of not that you needed validation, Tom, but like it's sometimes nice to have that external nod in the right direction. Yes, what you put in was worth it after all.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we can all agree from a bodybuilding standpoint, I'm always slightly behind on condition. You know, I think every time I get to a show, I always need about 3 or 4 more weeks. And getting to the FitX and winning that show, then having the PCA a couple of weeks later, my head was just like, right, I'm completely done now. I don't even if I were to try and diet even harder for 3 or 4 more weeks and get my glutes in, I'm not going to get any satisfaction from that. And that really, I'm not. Psychologically, I'm not that way inclined. I just wanted to get it done, go to Marbella with Joe, have a good time over there, have some, rekindle some friendships over the summer. That's where my head went. But yeah, it was a really nice prep, and it was really enjoyable to have Cal back in. Callum Raystrick at Muscle Mentors, or Pro Physique now, isn't it? Pro Coach, sorry. And it was a really good one. Learned a lot about myself and gained a lot of mental resilience from that particular prep.
What do you think those main things were that you learned about yourself?
I just think, it coincided with me separating with my long-term partner of about 8 or 9 years. So it was both a positive and a negative. I became very isolated back where I was living in Sidcup, which was near Crayford. The whole reason of me moving really back there was, one, for her, and also two, kind of utilising that gym and that environment, as we discussed before. But I think it just allowed me to be very vulnerable and quite open and kind of dissect myself and allow myself to sit there of an evening when I've got no food left, literally got nothing left to eat in terms of calories, and just kind of allow myself to look back at how I've kind of potentially treated my partner or treated other people. And it was tough, because I think not a lot of people have got it in them to do that. Naturally, we're humans, we kind of bury our head in the sand and not want to address it. But yeah, I kind of almost physically looked at myself in the mirror and had a good talk with myself. And yeah, it was I got a lot out of that.
Doing that self-work and that level of introspection is, of course, painful, but it puts you in a path that's much more aligned moving forward, because you probably know a lot more about the inner workings of your mind when you're at your absolute lowest, but also at your most stretched in terms of pushing yourself for the absolute peak of human physical condition while still being able to stand and lift a barbell and some dumbbells. It's a deadly combination in terms of the amount of stress that you probably were going through during that period.
It was pushing, like you said, the boundaries of physical and psychological stress, but it has allowed me to, in any further situations, cope and handle it a lot better. Even from a kind of physical point of view now, switching directions and going down a more kind of endurance / functional path. Some of those sessions that we do at March On, or even the program that Jade's doing, because I've had that resilience built from years of bodybuilding, psychologically I can continue and push on. Obviously, we've still got a long way to go in terms of adaptation to that particular training, but I think a lot of it is, and others will agree, very psychological.
Yeah, undoubtedly, Tom. What was it about maybe winning that made it easier to bow out on a high, I suppose? Because if you win that show, does it make it easier to say, okay, I'm going to leave that in the past now, or do you think that was always going to happen?
I think, yeah, like I said, I think because I won, it was like, as we mentioned, I wasn't doing it to necessarily prove anything, more so to myself, but that was the cherry on the top, winning a show like that. And I was like, well, I've came to do, I've done what I've came to do, and then why on earth am I continuing to in some way continue to kill myself with the drugs that we're taking for any longer. You know, I wasn't in that headspace. I remember a couple of weeks out, Cal saying to me, would you consider taking this particular compound? And that had the association to Ziz. I don't know if you remember Ziz, the fitness influencer guy. And I was like, I don't want it that bad. You know, I want it to the point whereby I'd like to push myself without the use of those sort of substances. And he kind of gave me that ultimatum: if you're taking this, or we go and do an additional hour on the Stairmaster. And I was like, let's just do the Stairmaster. So yeah.
It's interesting that somebody that's so well informed in that space that you can make a better decision, because one of the things that we spoke about last time round was just how ill-informed some people are and how willing they are to take risks. And like, you're somebody that always came from not necessarily a pro-anabolic standpoint, but a pro-choice standpoint and a pro-education standpoint, which I think was extremely valuable to the community and really opened up to a place now where we actually see far more creators openly speaking about their usage, albeit presenting what they want to present, of course. And I think that was one of your biggest contributions to the space. But one of your most recent contributions, which is also extremely helpful and valuable, is that you've decided to move away from steroids, and you're taking people on that journey with you to say, this was my identity for a long time. The closing the name, TM Cycles, is a huge part of who you were and what you created online and what you built and the audience that have come with that. But to move away from that is quite a big decision when you look at the identity that you had built for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. But I, you know, my channel was predicated on anabolic steroid usage in bodybuilding. That is not me anymore, and I don't want to continue holding that. You know, I very much want to go back to being normal Tom, and what comes with that is a potential detachment from TM Cycles. It's not going anywhere. You know, the YouTube channel is very much going to stay quite consistent, and I don't want to necessarily get rid of the audience members. So we're still going to create content to kind of cater for those people, but it's also about potentially creating a separate YouTube channel, also as an experiment, just because the YouTube algorithm is constantly changing and evolving. And I think the way in which they're rewarding creators now is within the first 24 to 48 hours, if you get a good response from your subscribers, then you're more inclined to get onto the algorithm. So if I have built a fan base over the last 8 or 10 years through vast majority bodybuilding and anabolic steroid related, and then I produce a piece of content called functional fitness, it doesn't get a good response and YouTube don't reward it. So it's like, right, I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place here. What do I do? So it's very much kind of keeping TM Cycles alive, potentially doing some more anabolic steroid videos, raising more awareness, I think is what I would like to do, and kind of drip feed the bodybuilding content. But then with this new channel, open up to kind of challenges. You know, how fast does Kipchoge run? 12,000 calorie challenge, Michael Phelps. So it's and all of that is from TikTok. You know, we become sucked into having very short attention spans. And what's happened now, and I've seen it because I've been in the game for 10 years. Back in the day, what did really well was like prep series and kind of following someone's progression. And now it's instant gratification. If I've got a Hyrox in January, what would do better is me doing a big thumbnail with a title, I took part in the hardest physical challenge ever, as opposed to like doing little videos here and there. And that's just the way it goes, unfortunately. We can't moan about it as content creators. We have to adapt and continue to either keep up with or stay ahead of. And that's just the beauty of content creation.
Equally, you evolve, and you're not necessarily the same person you were when you first picked up a camera. Like, you were working in a supplement store back then. Like, so much has changed throughout your life. And one of our mutual connections is Joe Delaney, and Joe talked on the podcast about his movement in terms of his content. And he had people say to him things like, "Oh, I liked it better when you were doing like grafting videos with Tommy B and you were showing us how to use Tinder." And he was like, "Well, I'm actually 30 years old now, and if I was doing that, I'd probably feel a bit tragic." And now he's showing you like his house refurbishment. He's showing his home gym. He's getting engaged to mags, like all this different stuff that occurs at different points in people's lives, and the audience have to respect that. And I think both of you actually have a very loyal core audience. But of course, if you radically move away from the type of content you create, then maybe they don't tune in as immediately as they used to in terms of showing up within 24 hours or 40 hours to boost the video within the algorithm.
Agreed. Yeah, and change is always going to happen. You can't become aggravated at someone changing. You know, it's just the natural process of life. And I think you were right about it being a drastic change since kind of stepping away from the stage last year, I made a conscious effort to slowly drip feed a change in content. So it wasn't like I've gone from bodybuilding, a very vigorous prep, into right now I'm functional. It was very much kind of experiment with certain things. We met up with Fergus at Gymshark and I asked him a few questions about nutrition. So it was kind of just seeing the response. And it's, as content creators, it's very experimental as well. You know, we have to put out a piece of content. How does that get the response? 90% of people enjoy it. You're going to get some people saying, oh, I think someone messaged the other day saying, what's happened? You've lost all your muscle and you've lost your girlfriend. I'm unsubbed. And I thought, fucking hell, like, that's brutal. Fair enough. But yeah, I mean, 90% of the, if not more, is positive. And like you said, I think myself and Joey have got quite a loyal fan base and they just want to see us as, you know, humans, individuals do well anyway. So yeah.
Exactly. Like, I can build a much deeper connection with somebody that I'm watching if I'm seeing them evolving and doing different things. And actually, I think there's an element of people becoming bored, and that's why you see some content creators within their niche start to do more like extreme silly things to try and attract attention. And we've actually seen some pretty public meltdowns on YouTube in recent years as well in the fitness community too, and we don't have to go into that. But I think by you being very real to like, oh well, my interests have actually changed a little bit, my priorities have changed, come on this journey with me. Like, you don't all have to, like, nobody, like 30,000-40,000 people aren't entitled to stay around and do that. Like, they don't owe you anything, but also you don't owe them to conform to a lifestyle that you no longer want to do. What were the pros and cons that you looked at when it came to moving away from bodybuilding?
I'd say the cons were the, not necessarily difficulty, but more so with client retention and my clients and potential clients seeing me transition from bodybuilding to more functional, and then them going, well, what is Tom coaching here? And I still to this day say that my online coaching is very much physique development, but with functional fitness as the cardio, as the output. So if I had a client come to me and said, look, I've got IB for in 3 months' time, I'd go, absolutely, look, our main priority is getting you into condition, but the way in which we would box off your weekly cardio would be through a variety of different EMOMs or AMRAPs and things like that. So, and that has been really enjoyable because I've been working with March on the PFCA and relearning, which is really nice, because when I did my personal training qualification years ago, back in 2012, and kind of doing a lot of strength and conditioning work, I know it, but it's just about, keeping up and refreshing. So going back to school, sitting down here with the notebook has been fantastic. So I'd say there's been a bit of a challenging part, but the pros is just that I don't have to, and you relating it back to your previous point of people having to create very hyper sensationalized content because they're not getting that traction. I don't want to ever pick the camera up and go, right, I have to be TM Cycles now and I have to start doing bodybuilding content just because I've got a fan base, and that is the worst position you can be as a content creator, is being two different people. And I've seen it firsthand. Someone pick up a camera goes off, I'm like, God, it's insane. So the pros are just the ability to continue creating content and enjoy the training that I'm doing and taking people on that journey. So yeah, I mean, it's been more positive than negative, if I had to say.
It certainly seems that way from the outside looking in, and it's interesting how you frame that from an anabolics perspective. Then you compete in your show, you win your show, but pretty much straight away you're talking to people the fact that that's me starting to move away from this. What's the process to do something as big as that, considering it was something that you'd taken on and off for such a long period of time since you were like 20 years old?
Yeah, so I mean, I just, after that PCA show, I dropped straight into a cruise, and then we had a couple of Marbella holidays, and I was in kind of peak condition anyway, so I didn't need to continue. Thankfully, I'm in a kind of psychological position whereby I don't necessarily, I think a lot of people get scared of that post-show window and they're like, I have to continue taking these drugs because I want to continue looking like that. I'm quite happy. I've always been quite happy with adaptation and my body changing. Like, it's mad how 2 years ago when we had that podcast, my goal was to be as big and as shredded as possible. Now my goal is just to be lean and covered in tattoos and have long hair. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I want to be part of the UVU club now. So it's mad how it changes, but like, I can adapt, and my choice to drop down into a TRT was very easy. And you know, I think the anabolic steroid world, when it comes down to things like TRT and coming off, I think it's I think they paint quite a negative picture in the sense that they make it out to be extremely hard and you're going to lose everything and things like that. And I really believe that that isn't the case. So I was more than content on a TRT dose to hold pretty much my condition over summer. And then I always said to myself, I will come off TRT at the point whereby I'm mentally strong enough. And that switch was about 5 or 6 weeks ago, when my training completely changed into predominantly focusing on this high rocks in January. And I was like, to be honest with you, I got towards the end and I was like, I'm getting sick of injecting this stuff into my body. I don't want any reliance on something. You know, I've grown as an individual, I've grown as an athlete, and I don't want this stuff in my body anymore. So get rid of it. And, you know, ever since, it's been okay. Had to prioritize sleep a little bit more and recovery, because I've been dipping a little bit. But if my natural testosterone doesn't kick in or restart, then we just go down the chemical route, I suppose.
I find it fascinating that you noted within yourself that if I go straight from this cruise period, which is still a relatively high level of drugs in terms of you're still outside of your physiological range, correct me if I'm using the right terms.
No. So TRT, you're in a physiological range. So you're not out. I think a lot of bodybuilders will fall into the trap of just simply halving their dose. So if you're on a blast of, say, 600 milligrams, my cruise is 300 milligrams, but in essence, that 300 milligrams will still keep you very much outside. So this is why these new era of modern bodybuilders run into so many health issues, is because they are permanently in a super physiological range and they're not allowing their vital, you know, organs, heart, liver, kidneys to kind of rejuvenate and regenerate. So yeah, I was always very right. Let's get into that TRT. Let's get blood work to highlight that. Quick trip to many checks. Testosterone is well within range. Happy days.
Yeah, I think that's vital as well. And acknowledging that I'm going to have to maintain this TRT until the switch flicks in my head to say I'm happy to go all in on the functional side of things, and I'm maybe a little bit less concerned about my physical appearance being the only single goal. Because one of the interesting things I always find with people who move from bodybuilding to functional fitness is quite often they've built the muscle that they hold and they walk around with looking very, very good. And the functional side of things, they don't necessarily lose it all, but they just become really, really fit and they still look fantastic. Like you mentioned Marchon, he looks incredible. He's built a lot of muscle over the years. But if 20-year-old Tom looked at you now, he'd be like, wow, amazing. I don't need drugs to go beyond that. I'm really, really happy. But we lose that in terms of our body dysmorphia during the periods where we're pushing for like the ultimate.
Yeah, and I get that asked a lot. Do you regret using steroids? And I say no, absolutely not. And I would never regret. Potentially, if I ever run into any fertility issues, then that answer may change. Absolutely, you know, if I try and have kids at a later period and I can't, then obviously it's going to be a huge regret taking anabolic steroids. But I understood that risk when I took them. What I built in terms of a social media presence and the ability to completely leave employed work and do TM cycles is a very hard one. So no, I would never regret it. But yeah, you are right. I do feel like, look, you know, saying that to 20-year-old Tom. But like I said, it's mad how it switches, because you go from kind of wanting to look like the likes of Dorian Yates and Arnold, and then in the space of 6 to 8 months, it's now like I want to look like a swimmer again. Do you know what I mean? And I first started swimming, that was like my go-to, and I swam for years, and I wanted to look like Phelps and Thorpe, and now we're back to that. So it does feel like a full, you know, we're completely back to the start.
Yeah, full circle. How do you manage the body dysmorphia, or what advice would you give to people managing body dysmorphia when they move away from purely physique focused, or potentially some of the supplements they're taking to achieve that?
Yeah, I definitely put in performance-based goals, because with physique development, there is always going to be an element of performance-based goals within physique development. That's the thing. So, you know, when we were training with Josh and Joe on a Friday and we had the hack squat, the Cybex, each Friday I'm looking to add an additional plate on. But that was very much the main reason why we were doing that, was because as soon as that set's done, into the posing room and off come the t-shirts. That doesn't happen now. So I think that the best advice I can give for people that are looking to step away, not necessarily step away, or just even start to incorporate some more functional work and just keep a certain level of bodybuilding training, because allows you to tick that box of physique development, but also allows you to experience this more functional element. And more often than not, you'll slowly see them switch. You'll slowly see, oh my, I'm only doing 3 bodybuilding sessions a week now, and I'm doing 4 or 5 functional. I certainly did that. I think I started with like 2 little AMRAP sessions post-workout. Then it turned into 3 and 4. Then I was like, oh, maybe if I do like a whole conditioning session today, and I'll leave out like an upper body. And then now I'm doing kind of upper body, lower body strength-based work, and then 75% endurance speed work.
Yeah, it's like that's literally progressive overload to your weekly planning, isn't it? You start off with a little dose, and you've just worked your way up to a dose that you're enjoying as well. I think it's vital that you bring up how much you get like a positive feedback from having like a physical or performance-based goal rather than just how you look, because ultimately I suppose you probably have achieved your peak aesthetic look based on what was coming into your body, and the focus in your training was around that. You cannot expect to look that way without the same level of hormones in your body and without the same level of hard physical training. Like some of your training that you were doing with Josh and Joe was like absolutely incredible, touching weights that you would never have expected to touch for reps and for a connection with the muscle that you would never expect. So if you then switch to doing more cleans and burpees and box jumps and assault bike, you're not physically going to look the way that Arnold or a bodybuilder on stage is going to look.
No, which is absolutely fine as well. You know, you I know it's a bit kind of hypocritical for me to say that your success is not predicated on your physique, when in essence it is to a certain degree. But, you know, I see so many people sort of viciously fixate on the way they look, and it's almost like an anticlimactic response, is that they'll put everything into looking a certain way for a holiday, and then they're like, oh, right, you know, what was I actually trying to achieve here? But also the dopamine hit that you get from this style of training is so much higher. Like, as much as I'd love looking at the logbook on a Friday and going, right, I've done 6 plates on a Cybex hack. How do I feel in that current point? You know, I've written down my notes and I was ecstatic, but the fatigue element after it kicked in straight away. I couldn't really focus much. You know, we used to do all of our client check-ins prior to us training, because we knew on that leg session at MuscleWorks, the day's a write-off. Whereas now I can get up. I did Blaze this morning at David Lloyd. Like, if you said Team Cycles, you'll be doing Blaze in 2 years' time, I go, fuck off. Now I'm doing Blaze. But what that does is it allows me to really expand the mind. I'm active, I'm open, I'm energized. I can go on the computer, I can do a podcast. So I think just broaden the mind a little bit. And I think it's very, very easy for bodybuilders to get caught in that trap of, once I'm in bodybuilding, that's me. It's a bit like being a drug dealer. These drug dealers like, oh, I'm a drug dealer now. I can't get out of it. And the same with bodybuilding. I've done bodybuilding for so long. I don't know anything else. I can't do anything else. Everything, my business, my life is predicated on and around bodybuilding. And that isn't the case. And I've definitely felt that when I stepped off the stage. I thought, oh my God, I'm not competing anymore. But, you know, daily compounding of like new things and experiences, you soon start to realize, oh, I don't necessarily need to be a bodybuilder anymore.
What kind of things were you checking in on yourself mentally to assess that you were able to come off TRT?
Great question. I think, really good question. I was still going through kind of processing my breakup, if I'm being completely honest with you. It was when you are in a relationship with someone for 8 or 9 years, and having been through so much of that person, you know, we almost grew together, started at around the same time where TM Cycle started. We moved in from a studio flat at the bottom of a garden to a flat, then a 2-bed, then a house. So it was very, very hard. And I think at the point whereby I could say to myself, right, I'm fully over this person now. Now I can really kind of switch on, get rid of that old. And it did feel like, anabolics did feel like I was holding on to a bit of her/my old life. Do you know what I mean?
There's a huge association there. I can completely see that. Yeah. Like, in terms of, I was using these when I was with this person. This is who I was then. If I hold on to that, then that still part of me is a little bit alive.
Absolutely. It's so true. It's so true. And it seems mad saying it, that the reason why you're coming off anabolics or testosterone is because you've got over someone, but that's just how we work sometimes. And obviously a very big part of that was ready for me to fully immerse myself in High Rocks. I spoke to Jade Skillen. I was like, look, I'm doing High Rocks end of January. she only does, I think, 12-week blocks, but I had 16 weeks, so like program me 4 weeks additional if you can. And she was like, that's absolutely fine. I was like, look, I am a guinea pig now. And the beauty of this style of training is that I don't know whether this is hard or not, in the sense that if I were to hire a coach and they gave me a bodybuilding plan, I could go, right, that's quite a lot of leg volume. It's not a lot of shoulder volume. What she's got me doing in the gym every day, I'm completely unaware. So it's like the beauty of the unknown, which I absolutely love. And I'm looking forward to now doing the event in January and seeing how we get on.
There's a benefit to naivety sometimes, because you just do as you're told and you give it your all. And I actually notice this with quite a lot of things. Sometimes it's like self-development books. Some people are like, oh, that book's rubbish. But if somebody reads it and they action every point in it, naively being like, okay, well, I'll improve it, it's better than the person that read 10 books that are all brilliant and really like well quoted and people rate them and don't action any of it. Whereas you're going in and you're just relentlessly actioning what you've been told. And even if it's not a 10 out of 10 program, if it's an 8 out of 10 program, you're going to get more than if you had a 10 out of 10 program, but you kind of were a bit suspect in a few different bits and pieces and you thought like, oh, maybe I know better, and you didn't quite commit to it. I really like that you're willing to be a white belt, is a phrase I would use. You're willing to be a total white belt and you're like, I'm just going to work my way up.
Absolutely. And that's with everything, you know, even with education for us content creators or online coaches, you must always be the student and go in. I had a back-to-back day at March on a couple of weeks ago. I went for the games day on the Saturday, and then I went back for the PFCA course on functional on the Sunday. And it's just so invigorating learning again. Like, I think a lot of us get into a certain position, be it financially or from a status point of view, and go like, right, I don't really need to do anything now. I'm getting a good income. My followers are coming in, and that's the worst. And I hold my hands up. I've definitely been there, even with the sort of TM Cycles member site when it was at its peak of like 3,500, 4,000 members. I thought, I'm just a little kid from Lewisham. My mum's a nurse, my dad's a teacher. I can't believe I'm in this position. And I took my foot off the gas a little bit. And that was, I intentionally closed that website and got rid of my clients to make myself uncomfortable. I got towards the end of my bodybuilding, I was like, right, TM Cycles is associated, that member site, with me and bodybuilding. Get rid of it. We didn't close it fully. It's a single one-off fee now as opposed to a monthly. And then I was like, right, a lot of my clients are kind of very much, 75% of them are using anabolics, and I don't really want to be recommending doses anymore. So I was like, right, I got rid of a lot. I had a big clean out. And financially, I was putting money away each month from the start of prep so that I could have my summer off. I said to myself at the start of prep, I was like, right, this is my last bodybuilding show I'm ever going to do. As soon as it's done, we change. We go back to being normal Tom. And picking back up in terms of getting clients again and, producing content was tough. Like I had some of my low days were as low as the days that I had on prep when I just split up with my partner, because I was like completely exposed, very vulnerable, in new territory. And even that, again, I always take, regardless of how low or how a certain way my mind is, I will always try and take a positive from that and continue kind of using that as resilience and learning from it.
I think that's powerful because, like you say, money and like career and status and where you're heading with your business has a huge effect on on where our head's at, because it gives us an indication of how valuable the work that we're doing is. And if there's days where you're like, oh, I'm not quite sure that I'm like going to make this work as well as my previous member site has, how do I fix this? You're of course going to visit those places where you're maybe doubting, am I going to bring in the condition I want for this particular thing? Am I going to be able to adhere to this level of training intensity in this diet when I'm feeling so fatigued? There's a lot of similar feelings that are going on at that point in terms of probably your brain chemistry. How much do you think having High Rocks as a focus has helped you from a competitive perspective? Because it seems like that very much links to one, feeling like you're completely over previous feelings and relationships, but also you've now got something to really aim at that's competitive in the same way that you had a show that you were counting down into too.
Huge. I'm someone that needs a goal, be it from a business point of view or a physical point of view. And when I don't, that's when I mentally started to deteriorate. After the show, I didn't know what I was doing with training. I was like, what content I'm going to try and create here? So I went down the route of trying to produce content whereby we can highlight the balance and me being able to go out, drink and have food, but also training at the same time. But then that in itself has a shelf life. There's only so many videos you can do about calorie backloading, low alcohol drinks before you're like, fuck, like I need to start. What do we do now? I had a go at Olympic lifting with Joe. Coach Joe Brugger, who's now on the MetFlow course, which is just an absolutely wizard when it comes down to that kind of training. I dipped my toe in these things, and then I finally found something that clicked, and it was this kind of functional. So once I started to enjoy that, I was like, well, I don't want to go down the CrossFit route. I don't. It doesn't particularly appeal to me. And then I saw a couple of guys go to Hyrox events, and I was like, this looks really interesting. 8 1 kilometer runs with work in between. And then I think it was Adam Collard that I saw do it with Jade in London last year. And I was like, this looks good. It's taxing, it's competitive, it's the sort of environment that I'm used to. Lots of people, lots of eyes, let's go for it. So yeah, and I've just completely immersed myself in it. And now it's a case of kind of planning out my years. So once Hyrox is done, I think Joe Brightman wants to do one as well, but he's still like 115 kilos, trying to lose weight. His knees are battered and his shin splints are terrible. So I think we're going to try and do one in the summer. I'd like to do like a long bike ride as well, London to Paris or something like that. And then the London duathlon in September. So yeah, it's nice to have those in mind. And it's definitely something I'd recommend as well. If you are someone that is competitive, have a plan, have a game plan, be it 3, 6, 12, 10, however many months in the future, and just allow yourself enough time to prepare for it.
Yeah, it's nice to have things to look forward to. And as humans, we are like anticipatory beings, and we massively benefit from things to look forward to and look towards. And you recognizing that in your personality and filling out your diary accordingly, of course, is going to allow you to do those sprints where you're working really hard before something, enjoy the experience, and then it's like, right, okay, I'm now going to work really hard in this particular domain. It might be slightly different as well, which nowadays I think you're open to more novelty because you're not within a really strict regime of bodybuilding too.
Absolutely, yeah, and like I said, it's the effect of bodybuilding that over the years has kind of compounded to me thinking that I can't do anything else. And then when I quit, I was like, I started going to boxing on a Wednesday. I was like, oh my God, I can go to boxing. Or, if there's a jiu-jitsu class on Friday, I'm like, I can book it. I can actually book in, and I'm getting all excited. Whereas back in the day, I thought, it's just bodybuilding that I'm doing. There's no way I could do anything like that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. One of the last areas I want to ask you around anabolics in particular is when it comes to recognizing that you haven't done a PCT, because that was something we spoke about the last time. When will you start to know that your natural levels have come back and that you're happy to not use chemicals, or that you might actually have to? Yeah,
so what we are looking for, and Joe Brightman's in a very similar position to me at the moment. He's slightly ahead. I think he's about week 8 or 9, and his blood work has shown some positive signs already, because his FSH is starting to flicker back into that usual range. A really good podcast with Dr. Dean and Dave Crosland talk about how we are now seeing people respond quite well without having to take post-psychotherapy because of potential lifestyle factors. Some people may be completely unlucky and come off testosterone and there's no chance of it coming back and they have to use PCT. So we'll see. Like I said, blood work is going to be the number one indicator, but I'm almost in a position whereby I want to get it done, but I don't want that to subconsciously affect how I'm feeling. In the point, at the moment, I wake up and I'm fine, and I don't, I have a few dips in the day, but I don't know if I get my blood work done and it says 0. Am I then going to go, oh my God, I've got 0 testosterone? I feel like
self-fulfilling prophecy. You read the data and you're like, that's how I feel.
Yeah, and this is the same with like clients and sleep. So we track our sleep for my clients, and sometimes they wake up, they feel refreshed, and they'll look at sleep cycle and say 80%, and that's that drop in percent. They almost subconsciously think, oh no, I'm tired. So a lot of the guys, I say to them, look, just don't track your sleep. As long as we wake up, feel energized and training's good and recovered, don't do it. Same as like HRV. That's why I had my reservations when we used to test HRV with Cal. I'd do it in the morning. I'd feel ready to go to the gym, more than ready, excited, pre-workouts on board, do my HRV. And it's like, you need another day's rest. I'm like, oh shit. Do you know what I mean? So I think what I'm going to do is get my blood work done, not open the email. We'll open the email in, say, January when I get them done again, and then we can do like a comparison video, because if it does get to December, January, and there's no flickering or there's no response at all, then we have to go down the chemical route, which is fine. You know, it's not like, unfortunately, it was just in a position whereby if we can restore our test without taking more drugs, then happy days.
Data is power, but not when it cripples you. And sometimes we can drown in all the information and data that we have. Ultimately, it's about the knowledge that we apply. And if you can compartmentalize that and say, right, okay, I'm going to deal with that in January and just focus on the things that I can do. And one of the things that you mentioned there was sleep. And I know that you've actually added in more sleep to try and counteract potentially recovery levels. What's been your approach to that, Tom?
Yeah, so usually I'll be around 9 p.m. that I go to bed and wake up at 5, but I'm now trying to do, like, when I see about 8 p.m. I start to wind down. You know, I've put in place the Lumi lamp, which is fantastic. If anyone is struggling with kind of the transition from summer into autumn, winter, I think it's a fantastic tool to have. The sad lamp as well, one of these things is what I'll do. So I'll wake up in the morning, and because it's still dark outside, I'll turn it on and just give myself a good hour. But like I said, it's a case of me just giving an additional hour to an hour and a half, and that seems to be okay. So like I said, it was 9 p.m. and we used to wake up at 5. Now it's 9 p.m. and I wake up about 6:30, and then I'll still have a nap in the afternoon, just like a Andrew Huberman, feet up, circulation, 10-minute power nap, and I'm ready to go again. But this particular style of training, I must admit, is less, it's taxing, but it's less fatiguing than I remember back in the bodybuilding days. Like I said, when I used to go and train with Josh and Joe, it used to take it out of me, you know, and every set was to failure, even our accessory movements. We're doing single arm preacher curls, we're screaming at each other, and that takes its toll. Whereas this, I can go into the gym, do an hour, intense, high heart rate, and come out feeling refreshed and energized and ready to attack the day.
Yeah, during the pandemic, I was using the garage gym to train, and the gentleman that owned the garage was a bit more into functional fitness, so I was kind of moved into doing more EMOMs and stuff like that as well. And I found my recovery was generally pretty good, but my hunger after the sessions was higher, which I never found when I do just less, so like lots and lots of steps for like a photo shoot prep or anything like that.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm in a position now whereby I'm actively trying to lose weight as well. I'm about 88 kilos. I'd like to get down to a very lean 80 and just kind of try and maintain that as long as possible. But the only issue that you run into is that when you are actively trying to lose weight and pull calories down with this style of training, you need to be very cautious of recovery. And almost instantly you can feel under recovered when you take a certain amount of carbohydrates off, especially with this style of training. If I go and do like a capacity session at March I'm on my knees by the end of it, and I can usually like hammer down a 4-pack of Rice Krispie squares, and body comp stays the same. So does scale weight. You know, the amount of expenditure that we're doing in these sessions, and it keeps you very sensitive to carbohydrates and food as well. My nutrition has definitely changed a lot, kind of prioritizing higher fats at certain portions throughout the day, and carbohydrates around the kind of peri-workout window. Very similar to bodybuilding, but yeah, I think that's a big area that I've intentionally stepped up and improved.
Do you find the high fats, lower carb throughout the days helping you with your workflow in terms of your concentration, your ability to perform? I know that's something that I've certainly experimented with.
Absolutely, 100%. So, you know, having a salmon and cream cheese bagel with eggs, scrambled eggs, as opposed to something very high carb, low fat, it is massive. Like my ability to stay my focus is so huge. There's less crashes. I remember back in the off-season days when we're trying to get 800 to 1,000 grams of carbohydrates down, and this constant like up down of blood sugar was just leaving me like this. And even in the summer, we all had videos of me, Josh and Joe, like sitting in front of fans eating food. Like gone are those days, thankfully. But and it's also quite nice to condition yourself. So some days I wake up and think, let me try and attack this session fasted. You know, because if I can condition myself to do this workout without food, and then I introduce some food, my performance could potentially go up. So yeah, it is. I do really enjoy that element of it too.
Yeah, you're super leaning into it now, and I've always seen you as somebody that's very aware of their productivity and they're like optimizing these areas. But it seems like you've even learned even more into that now, because you've almost got more time to think about these things rather than necessarily like, am I having this particular pre-workout meal and post-workout meal perfectly timed because I'm trying to gain maximum muscle during this off-season, or I'm trying to retain maximum muscle during this off-season? What are the main things you've learned into from a productivity perspective?
With your comments on with regard to food, then I think definitely more intuitive when it comes down to food, just ensuring that I am getting X amount of protein in per day, and then kind of eating as and when I'm hungry has benefited productivity massively, because I may be back in the bodybuilding days, I may be in a real good work routine and look at the clock and think, if I don't eat now, I've then got to double up and I'm having a 1600 calorie dinner. Whereas now I can look at the clock and go, like, it's 12. I'm not very hungry. I'm in my, I'm very much zoned in at the moment with whatever project I'm doing. I can eat in an hour's time. But I think Gigi recommended an app called Toggle. I don't know if you've heard of it.
So
it basically tracks. So where is it? Toggle. So it basically tracks Toggle Track. It tracks your day. So it's a really good app to have for people that suffer with kind of procrastination and are a little demotivated. You essentially set it up. Whatever task you're doing, you'll press start. When that task is finished, you'll press stop. And over a couple of days, almost like a nutrition log, it allows you to see what foods you're eating. This allows you to see whereabouts I'm being most productive or least productive. And it also psychologically kicks you to think, hold on a minute, my phone is recording me working here. I need to actually work. So definitely sort of time boxing as well, which I think is Harvard rated as like one of the #1 business tools, which is to-do lists are kind of pretty outdated now. They have their relevance somewhat, but brain dumping, of that brain dump, three most important things, get it across your day. And then visually allowing yourself to see, right, 10 till 12, I'm working on MetFlow. Lunch 12 till 1 till 3, I'm working on client work. And it just allows you to be far more productive. And I have a lot more frequent breaks now. I used to sit in front of the computer and think, right, let me be on the computer for 6 hours. It's like after an hour and a bit, your productivity dips.
I think you see that a lot with video editing as well, don't you? You see guys that work for like 8 hours in a video, and you know that they're going to produce a masterpiece. Of course they are, because some of the YouTube cinematic stuff that you produced over the years, but lots of other creators have produced is absolutely stunning. But you wonder if they did it in short sprints where they maybe got their eyes away from the screen and came back, they would benefit tremendously from that.
100%. The vast majority of Gigi's edits were done in little bursts. If he was struggling with a particular transition, a particular piece, even like the show day vlog, he would keep me updated and say, look, I'm going back to this tomorrow. I say, I want you to create a cinematic masterpiece here. I don't care whether it's done next week or in 2 weeks' time. So yeah, I think most people tend to work. The research shows that I think the optimal time is 52 minutes of work, 17 minutes of low energy, as opposed to doing like 9 till 12, lunch 12 till 1 till 6. You just see massive dips in productivity.
Completely agreed. I'm very much of the opinion, much like you've added in time boxing, and I've benefited from interviewing Neo Real on the podcast, who wrote Indistractable, which is where that kind of concept comes from. I also believe that removing things from your day is a great way to be more productive. So while you've added time boxing, you've added this Toggle app, what are the things that you try to remove and keep out of your day, Tom?
Good question. I put my phone in the other room just because I'm terrible, even with my phone there, it has to get removed. Otherwise it is almost an addiction, because you get that dopamine hit. Say I've done a client check-in and my phone's there. That's like, right, I've got 5 client check-ins today, but after every single one, my dopamine hit is having a quick look on Instagram. It's crazy. And I think the vast majority of people are in that current headspace, but the phone goes completely out. But in terms of removing certain things, it's a good question. I don't think there's anything that I've actively tried to remove. I sold my Xbox when I moved to the new place. That was one thing I was like, right, I don't really need it here. I know what's going to happen. I'm going to have late nights with the boys on Warzone. We got away with it during the lockdown, and it was like one of the best things. And I think it helped a lot of us through it. But I got rid of that. I've never been one for a telly in my room. I've never kind of seen the positive idea from that. So there's nothing I can say that I've
the phone's the big one that most people bring up, Tom, because it's just such a drain on attention. And of course there's like certain things that we can do that feel productive as well. One of them's like replying to email. And that can be like a never ending cycle. Like I know if before my corporate job starts, if I log on early and I reply to work emails, by the time I log back on at 9 o'clock after I've been a walk, they've just refreshed. So I might as well wait till 9, batch answer them between 9 and 10, and then go about the rest of my day. It's very, very interesting what you can remove. Like I've even experimented with things like website blockers, because I'm writing an ebook for the first 150 episodes I've done, the 15 biggest lessons that I've learned from a self-development perspective. And honestly, I actually quite like writing. I did a politics degree at university. I'm kind of aligned that way. Like I feel it's a bit of a skill set. But you will do anything to avoid the discomfort of not quite knowing what to write next. And it could be your phone, it could be cleaning your flat, it could be checking an email and feeling like, oh, I did something productive there, but really you've just escaped from what you were actually meant to be doing.
Absolutely. I tell you one thing that I've got rid of: pornography. I stopped watching pornography about, God, when was my cousin's wedding in Spain? About August. And I'm one of those people that I need a certain event to happen for me to instigate something. So like me going away, and then like upon returning to the UK, it's like a refresh. It's a little bit like how people view 1st of January or like a Monday. Like I'm not going to start something on a Thursday. I'll wait until Monday. I was like, right, let me stop. You've seen the videos of like Andrew Huberman and people talking about pornography and its effects. And I think it's a big one, because we had the discussion with my group of friends and they were like, oh no, that's ridiculous. And I think if you can control it and you don't feel like you've got a problem with it, then we can probably say it's acceptable. But for me, I was like, let me see the effects in terms of mental clarity, time as well, of just completely getting rid of it. And you talk about website blockers. I think I turned on my like Virgin adult thing on there. So like even when I get sent links from the boys, I'm like, oh shit, I physically can't open it. So that was one thing that I completely got rid of, to answer your question. And those sort of things really, I think that was instigated through this self-development sphere of MetFlow and really trying to take 1%. And it may not be a huge amount to someone, but if it means getting rid of pornography or gambling or something like that, where you have those instant gratification, those instant dopamine hits, and people do it with drugs, you know, like we're in a position now whereby within 10 minutes I could order cocaine to my house and it's here. I could view pornography in a matter of seconds. So I think if you can pull yourself away from those instant dopamine hits, it can have very positive effects. And I'm not interested in it now. I would say it was quite difficult in the first couple of weeks, but it's got to a point now where I think Andrew Tate had a podcast with someone, and they were like, one way to stop yourself masturbating watching porn is set a camera up in
I saw this video.
Yeah, I think it was the ball guy. I can't remember his name.
He owns a gym out in Dubai, doesn't he?
Yeah, and it's very interesting because I think a lot of people, whether you love Andrew Tate or not, I feel like a lot of people it's given them the kick up the arse to go, right, let's not necessarily agree with some of his stances on women, but what he's done in terms of being very open about self-discipline and kind of self-improvement, let me try and take it, because it's the first time. It's probably not the first time, because there are some other individuals doing what he's doing, the sort of David Goggins of the world. But I think what's happened with him is it spread to such a wider audience. People are going, maybe I should go to the gym, or maybe I should be more disciplined here. So that rise of him almost instigated that, right, let me start making some life decisions here.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that we could go into on that, Tom. But for me, one of the reasons that Andrew Tate is actually overall a force for positive change is because he is actually so far away from the narrative that we're being told that all men are evil and terrible and masculinity is a terrible thing, and wanting to go to the gym and wanting to make yourself better and wanting to pursue money and be hedonic is a terrible thing, and we're all a disgrace for thinking it. And what having like sexual desires about women, and like if you're like a young guy at school and desiring to get with women, like that's a demonic thing and demonic behavior. But ultimately you don't have to take everything that the messenger brings. You just can take the best points. And if he moves us slightly further towards the center, if we look at it like a political sphere, if we've been far too left wing and he's very, very right wing, maybe he moves us to the center and we have a much more balanced conversation. We have a much happier group of men, because I think we do have a men's mental health crisis overall in terms of how men feel, in terms of the lack of purpose. And if he gives them that a little bit, fantastic. Of course, you don't have to take absolutely everything, but let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater just because you don't like some of what he says. And I appreciate some people listening to this might be quite annoyed by that, but we're having a nuanced conversation about the fact that some of what he has to say is significantly helping men improve themselves.
Absolutely. And that's what kind of pissed me off, was that this knee-jerk response of just like his name being mentioned and I don't like him. And when you start to actually dig a little deeper, why don't you like him? Oh, he's a misogynist. Is that bloke going around? Can you define misogyny? Go away. So it's like, it's this very left wokey types that we need to be proactively recommending debate here. You know, like, you can't just become brainwashed by what the media, and it's fun, isn't it? Because he's recently converted to Islam, hasn't he? So, and then this issue with True Geordie has now resulted in him being cancelled from Gymshark and from the poker. It's like, there's a witch hunt from the media by Andrew. There's a witch hunt for Andrew Tate by the media, and now it's like switched. It's like he's done so well at kind of withstanding this force that the kind of change, the emotion has changed him now. But yeah, you're right. I think if we're educated enough to understand certain things that he says are bad, but we can take positive from the other things that he's saying, then I really don't see an issue with that.
You can pick and choose. It's the same with Jordan Peterson. I don't agree with him on everything that he says, but I agree with a lot of what he says. He actually posted a nutrition video the other day, and I completely disagree with his stance on carbohydrates. He demonizes them massively, but that's coming from his perspective, where him and his daughter have to adhere to a particular diet due to like inflammatory problems and different gut issues that they have. And that's absolutely fine, because I can understand that he's coming from that particular angle, in the same way that you can maybe picture things that Andrew living in Romania for a number of years and having 6 girlfriends is actually culturally fine for him, but you might find that abhorrent. That's also absolutely fine. There's lots of different cultures and behaviors over the world that if you found out about them and researched about them, you would probably find them abhorrent, but you've just decided to turn your ear on these because they're in the online spotlight.
Yeah, it's the hypocrisy as well. You know, we have conversations about Andrew Tate, and then the same people go off to Qatar for this World Cup, and you think, hold on a minute, you're talking about Andrew Tate, and then you're now going to a country with the worst oppression for women and LGBT rights and things like that. You think, well, where are you drawing the line here? So yeah, you're right. And I watched Stormzy on Louis Theroux last night, and Louis was talking about his nutrition. He was like, yeah, I don't have like white rice, I don't have white pasta. And I was like, I'm screaming at the telly saying, I wish I could sit Stormzy down for an hour and say, look, we can still eat these things and you can still look and probably perform better than you currently are by getting rid of these things. But, you know, it works for some people, doesn't it? You know?
Yeah, exactly that, Tom. And one of the other areas I want to ask you when it comes to productivity is saying no to things. So we're talking about you removing pornography. So obviously you say no to the temptation of that as well. But what are some of the things that you feel that you are able to say no to that enable you to say yes to other things?
Yeah, I think clients is the biggest one. I think we had this on an off the cuff podcast. We kind of joke about Josh Bridgman's ability to say no. Like, he just hasn't got it in him sometimes. He's like, but not necessarily a people pleaser, but you know, he's like, I do find it difficult because of the response, the potential response that someone's going to give. If I say no, they're going to be like, what do you mean? And he's like, I'm not, you know, he's such a nice person. I don't think he's that way inclined to cope with like potential aggravation from someone if they get annoyed that they're back up. Whereas I'm the total opposite. Like, I almost get off on someone saying, can you do this? I say no. And they're like, oh, fucking hell. So learning to say no is a skill in itself. I think a lot of us have to, unfortunately, when we start any business, be it online coaching, have to say yes to a lot of people, because it builds our understanding of who the sort of people that we want to work with. I don't think you should start any process and have the guard straight up. You know, 10 years down the line, I'm now in a position whereby I can vet my clients. If they don't fall into the category of who I want to coach, then they're not coming through. That's absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But you know, there's sometimes podcasts that I'll say no to, and you know, I'm a little bit apologetic, but I've also got to kind of think of it selfishly from, you know, a time constraint, a business point of view as well. So, I mean, I don't have any personal issue saying no. I think I'll probably get that from my mum. You know, my dad's a little bit, yes, man.
Yeah, there's a huge amount we gain from how our parents deal with not conflict, but the ability to reject, but also to receive rejection themselves as well. So that it's fascinating how much transfers over from our childhood as well.
And I've had people say no to me enough times in the past for me to be, you know, have a thick enough skin for me to learn from them. You know, if I'm open about something, or I try and get someone on board, and they say no, I'm like, oh, all right, cool. It allows me to understand it a little bit better. So it's you know, it's no real issue at all.
My mind's just gone back very quickly before we wrap up, Tom. Is you experienced a little bit, not of the cancel culture, but of the strangulation of your content during the pandemic, in the same way that Tate was limited. But he obviously has thousands of members of Hustlers University who post his content out there. You didn't quite manage to turn the member site into a cult, Tom, who would share all your videos. But how have you moved forward from that? Do you feel like you're past that stage where like your accounts are being restricted based on what your not political stances were, but your stance on freedom was?
Yeah, I mean, I'll do it in a way that isn't going to get me blocked. You know, I'll do it. Maybe I was a little naive back in the day and just being completely open, but I think there's still ways that you can do it. I think if you really wanted to, as a content creator, go to that level, then going on a platform like Rumble. I know a lot of people are transferring over there. You've got Andrew Tate, Russell Brand's recently gone over there. But yeah, I learned it the hard way, and my story views almost halved. It kept having the I don't even want to say the word because of the potential nowadays. But
do you know, when I was tagging you, Tom, I had to post that the podcast gone live and some of the clips that we had, I had to type in your full username in order for it to come up. If I typed in TMC, of course you would expect TM Cycles to come up, because how many people do I follow with that that handle? But I had to type in the full thing, so that there is really sneaky ways that you are being like restricted from view.
Yeah, which is absurd. Like, and Elon Musk now taking over Twitter and potentially getting some people back. I can understand the potential frustration, and a lot of people are scared about what that opens. But I think what we need to reinstate all the time is that debate. You can't just, because you disagree with what Andrew Tate says, let's silence him. That's never going to work. Cancel culture in itself doesn't work. Look at him. He's the most uncancelable man ever. He's everywhere. He's on Piers Morgan again. So no, that I learned from my mistakes. But whenever there is something politically that I want to talk about, you know, this continual recycling of prime ministers, I'm more than happy to be quite open about it and have debates in my DMs about it. But I think the way in which I get around it is do it in a comical way, as opposed to saying like, fuck Rishi Sunak and the Tory parties. And if I do, I try and give a balanced argument as to why I have that particular view. Whereas before I was very like closed-minded, no to the vaccine, etc., etc.
Yeah, no, I think it's healthy, and like I would always encourage open debate, because, like I say, there's content creators that I follow that I agree with large parts of what they say, and I disagree with other parts, and that might be political, it might be religious, it might be their take on nutrition, it could be absolutely anything. And us having those conversations is absolutely vital. And speaking of conversations, Tom, this has been an absolute pleasure. If people want to continue the conversation with you, where should they head towards?
So type in TM Cycles for Instagram. I think I'm unshadow banned now, and then Thomas Maw on YouTube. But like I said, there's a potential for the new YouTube channel to open up very, very soon. So yeah, Thomas Maw or TM Cycles.
Excellent. Thanks, Tom. Thank you to the listener. If you've enjoyed this one, please take a screenshot, pop it in your Instagram story, tag us both, and I'll be back to speak to you all again very, very soon.